Georgia beats TCU in the title game 65-7, and honestly, it wasn't even as close as that score shows.
They showed you it was levels to it. Georgia's at a completely different level in terms of a football program. Not much competition out there for the Bulldogs now outside of a handful of teams. And TCU, great season, but you came up short.
Right, and we established yesterday, if you ain't first,
you're last.
You're last. Yeah, Georgia finishes the season with just about every superlative in the book. A perfect 15-0 record, back-to-back champs for the first time in school history, and the first team to do so in the college football playoff era. So let's bring in our team site expert, Rusty Mansell, who is on site in LA. Rusty, glad you could join us today. You've covered two of these things now. What stood out to you the most about last night?
I think when you look, I heard Carl talk a little bit about this. When I saw TCU walk in media day on Saturday, and I saw Georgia walk in, I was like, wait a minute, this is going to take a dynamic game from their quarterback to offset what I'm looking at, because Georgia's so much bigger at every position. And then you see it in person last night. It was pretty much over. Had a busted coverage for 60 yards. That game was never, ever in doubt. Georgia just completely manhandled TCU. Two different rosters, in my opinion. I think Carl will probably agree with me.
Yeah, absolutely, Rusty. When I look at it, you just talk about the talent disparity that you talked about. So when you saw those guys come in there on media day, did you think that it was any way other than the quarterback position that TCU could have done anything effectively? Other than the one play, like you just said, it didn't seem like TCU could get anything going. It seemed like Georgia was playing at times with 15 guys on the field at once.
Exactly. And here's the formula. For the last 3 years, Georgia's lost 2 games now. They lost to Florida in 2020 and Alabama in 2021. What's been the common factor? Elite quarterback play with elite wide receivers. Well, I knew that TCU had a wide receiver in Quentin Johnston who had 1 catch for 3 yards last night. He still might be the number 1 wide receiver taken. And we see him in person, he certainly looks like an NFL first rounder, but he did absolutely nothing last night. So you take those factors in, and I looked at them, 4 wides, things like that. Ohio State gave Georgia fits. You know why? Because they had dudes. They had 4 wide receivers that could go. And they had C.J. Stroud, who played out of his mind, who is a NFL first rounder. So, I looked at TCU last night. I thought, man, they're going to have to do some really special things. And Georgia was going to have some turnovers. They're going to have a couple of pick sixes like they used to beat Michigan, some things like that. I just didn't think they were going to line up and go toe-to-toe with Georgia and win that game. And I predicted it 38-17. Almost went 41-10, but it wouldn't even have been close. I mean, it was 65-7. I think I heard this morning that's the biggest, most lopsided game in bowl football history, not just a national championship. So when you look at a complete dominance, this is going to be an off season with 2 topics. And what's going to happen when we go to 12 teams? Are we going to have games like this? And then can Georgia go back to back to back? Because what Kirby Smart has built, and I'm going to tell you right now, I've said it 100 times yesterday in different interviews, that was not their best team. And I don't know how it's going to play out next year, but 1 through 85, Georgia's roster next year, they're going to be better.
Well, Rusty, you kind of brought it up, the way Kirby has built this team. He's 47 at this point with 2 national titles under his belt in coaching 7 seasons at his alma mater. Nick Saban has 7. When he won his first national championship, he was 53. So Kirby Smart already has a head start on him. And then you look at this Georgia Bulldogs team since the year 2017. They are 72-10 with 2 national titles, 3 SEC titles, 5 SEC East division crowns. So, in other words, Kirby Smart is dominating college football in the way that Saban just did for the last decade. What do you think it's going to take for Kirby Smart to pass Nick Saban as the greatest of all time?
I don't know that that's really – I just heard Kirby basically talk about that subject just downstairs a few minutes ago. We had his last press conference, and he said, look, I don't want my career – and I don't want this program, and I don't want these kids to be defined by championships. That's the goal here, he said. But, really graduating these kids, letting them become fathers, being successful men. He goes, that's why I'm doing this. He goes, and he had a great point. There's been a lot of great coaches that didn't get to win one of these things. So, I looked a little deeper into that. Like, is Kirby Smart trying to race to win championships? I don't think he is. I just think he's trying to be the best he can every season. If it winds up being a championship, that's what it is. But, the Nick Saban stuff right now, what they've done in Alabama, I think Georgia still has a long way to go before they start talking about that. But I think if you're talking about in the now, what is going on right now, what Georgia has done in his first 7 years, and I think about the first press conference, and Kirby Smart had been in Alabama, obviously. In his very first press conference, he goes, we got to get bigger on both sides of the ball. We got to get large humans. And when you look at Georgia, I've covered this team now for 13 years. When you look at Georgia walk into a room now, it's one of those like, where are they finding people like this? You look at Darnell. I took a picture on Twitter the other day. Darnell Washington at 6'7.5", standing beside of Marius Mims, who's 6'6.5". That's a tight end and a tackle, and their whole room looks like that. So what Georgia's building right now, they're going to make a run, continue to make a run. But as far as chasing Nick Saban in Alabama, not sure that's kind of his end goal right now. And I tell you now, those first 7 years on Kirby, he's been through that presidency kind of look. He's put some age on this thing. So, look, it's demanding. Carl knows this is such a demanding job now on these coaches. And Kirby just said he's going to spend home thinking about next year and a couple of things he can do in the offseason to get this team even better.
Yeah, you talk about the size, just the different caliber of athlete. And for all the 5 stars on the roster, we know it was a walk-on who brought Georgia to where they are today, and that's Stetson Bennett. And you also look at, the head coaching legacy of Kirby Smart and now the legacy of Stetson Bennett. They'll always be tied together because, ironically, it was a walk-on quarterback who got Smart to open up his offense. Rusty, you mentioned Kirby's time at Alabama, what he learned from Nick Saban. Obviously, that's a run the ball and play stout defense approach. But in 2020, Kirby had to change things up. He had to go find a quarterback and some playmaking wide receivers, and he brought over Todd Monken, who called an excellent game last night. And Smart, he said it himself in the post-game presser, Stetson Bennett is the greatest dog of all time. So where do you see Bennett standing in the all-time list of Georgia greats?
I see Stetson Bennett is going to be one of those guys that never pays for a meal wherever he goes in the state of Georgia. Even when he's 50 years old, he's sitting there with his grandkids. He's going to be the guy in the restaurant that somebody comes over and takes a picture with, asks for an autograph. He is an absolute living legend in this state. What makes it so different is he grew up. You see the pictures of his dad holding him at like 2009 Georgia-Florida game. You look at all those things, and this kid's a lifelong dream. And I go back, I've heard him interviewed before, in August of 2021, when they named Juwan Mathis, the quarterback that or 20, they told Stetson, look, you're not getting reps right now. I mean, he went to 4th string basically. So you get this guy that he starts that game, Juwan Mathis starts that game against Arkansas, kind of stalls out. They make the decision to go with Stetson Bennett. At that moment, he leads them back to beat Arkansas. And next thing you know, man, Georgia, they found something. He continued to grow. He wasn't perfect. I think Stetson Bennett continued to get better. But I tell you what, the last 2 games, specifically that 4th quarter against Ohio State, where he went 12 for 14 for 203, and he made 2 throws on that last drive, a tight window throw to Brock Bowers and a ball against cover 2, that whole shot Carl knows about, when he threw it between the safety and the corner for Kearis Jackson. Those are things that tell you he's seeing the game and he's got guts and he's got the arm delivered. I'm interested how he does it, what kind of shot he gets in the NFL, but I know one thing. Stetson Bennett it was a no-show this morning for his last press conference ever at the University of Georgia. So I know he enjoyed it last night.
And he deserves
my man
all the
might
fun
drop
in
the
world.
press conference,
Hey,
awesome.
Rusty, Stetson Bennett is a guy that when you think about what he's done at Georgia, he's got to be a guy that's money is no good anywhere in the state. He should be able to be a part of any business, get any job, he could start a car dealership. If the NFL doesn't work out for him, he's going down as one of the most legendary dogs. He may not be the best player from a talent standpoint, but the ultimate winner, what college football is all about, Stetson Bennett is legendary in college football. He's etched his name in stone.
It's such a good story. No matter who you're a fan of, you root for those type of guys, a walk-on, and come out of nowhere. Look, I'm guilty as everybody. I worked Stetson Bennett out. I worked him out at Lowndes High School down in Valdosta in January of 2015. You know what my note said? Live arm, small. And I never in my million years thought this guy was going to bring back-to-back national championships. I thought he'd never make it to Georgia. He was basically committed to Mercer when Georgia came in and talked him into preferred walk-on at that time. So you look at that, how many times he's taken chances, how many times he's been told no. Stetson Bennett bet on himself over and over and over. He won that locker room. He won that staff. And what he did last night, absolute legendary for Georgia Bulldogs.
It was so cool to see him get that curtain call in the fourth quarter, too. Not a typical thing that you see in college football, especially from a guy like Kirby Smart. But you saw Smart getting a little bit emotional, at least on the TV broadcast when he was talking about Bennett. All right, Rusty, I hope you make it to all the pressers. I know it's a fun time out there. We appreciate you joining us today. And for all the Georgia coverage throughout the offseason as they go for the three-peat, make sure you are tuned into dogs247.com.